Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thanks so much. Stick around. I've got another great interview, this time with someone I know pretty well, although I have a feeling I'm going to know her even better after this interview. So, without any further delay, here is the introduction for this week's guest. Today's guest is on a mission to guide mission-driven entrepreneurs toward their audience, fostering genuine engagement that spreads their message far and wide. After a 25-year corporate career, she found her true calling as an entrepreneur. Her LinkedIn activities over the last 2 decades have led her to speaking engagements, podcast features, client acquisitions, and even a Forbes interview. Her brainchild, the magnet model, helps entrepreneurs build the authentic relationships that fuel their mission. Through personalized coaching, courses, group programs, and workshops, she empowers others to create a thriving online community where your ideal prospects actively seek you out. Please join me in welcoming Sophie Lechner. Welcome, Sophie.
Hello, Robbie. Thanks for having me here. I'm excited.
And in the global scheme of things, you are a neighbor of mine. You're over there
hmm
in New Jersey. I'm over here outside of Philadelphia. Thrilled that we can get together on this. So, as
Yes.
you know, it's a show about building strong networks, and the context is leadership. So, tell me,
Yeah.
how do you define leadership, and when did you realize you had the skills to lead?
Yeah. So to me, leadership is sort of about initiative, right? So you look around you, you see something that could be better, that could be done better, that could be run better. A situation where there's a gap, and rather than say, "Oh, well, that's a shame," or "That's a bummer," or "That's annoying," or you think, well, what could I do about it? Right. So that's the sort of the seed of leadership, I think, is having this first instinct of actually doing something about it. And then the second, obviously, super important component is rallying people around you. So whether it's other people who see the same issue, who are also sort of, feeling the pain of the issue, or and actually people who could address the issue, who could help with it, and then kind of rallying all these people together and saying, okay, how do we do this? We brainstorm and then actually taking action, and that could be something that is given to you. Obviously, you have a title, you're put in charge of a team, but I think it's something that is really innate in people. It could be developed, but it doesn't have to be within an official title, right? It's just something that you do on a day-to-day basis. That's what I think is leadership.
I really appreciate that. Initiative, rally, and action are the
Yeah.
three concepts I got from you. Make me
hmm
think of a really small thing that I took notice of years ago. I have volunteered at tons of events and I've led tons of events. And I remember seeing that people couldn't find the bathroom. This is like 25 years ago. But
Yeah.
like people couldn't find the bathroom. People couldn't find the bathroom. So I went and got a sign made and we put it up. And then everyone knew where to find the bathroom. like I had to
But
find the right people to give me the supplies. I
yeah,
had to get buy-in that this was needed. It's small, right? It's a small
yeah,
thing. Or if you
yeah,
see, like, I've been places where like signage falls over and everyone ignores it, and then someone has to
yeah,
remember to like pick it up and put it back, right?
yeah.
Small
Little
initiatives,
things,
rallying
exactly.
the people to
That's
see
true.
the problem or to help solve the problem, and then actually the action piece. I really love
hmm
this. I'm thinking like, is this a kind of IRA? I feel like you have a whole new scheme you could be teaching. You're really good with coming up with these things. So, when did you first realize you had some of these skills? When did this innate sense of leadership start to be developed in you?
Yeah. So I don't know that I actually had those words, to put to it, but the earliest instance that I can remember actually doing something pretty significant, in terms of leadership is I was in this student program. So we're going back, like over 30 years now.
Mhm.
I was in a law program that was with King's College and Sorbonne. So it was like two colleges, but it was a very small cohort in each. And back in those days, there was no alumni organization, there was no nothing like that. And because we had this very specific program, we didn't really fit into any sort of, job application type of things. We had to explain all the time, like, what is this thing, English and French law, blah, blah, blah. And so we all had trouble finding our internships and we were all struggling individually. So I got everybody to, not everybody, but like a whole bunch of us together, and we sat down and said, "Okay, what can we do?" And we started our own alumni organization. And we said, okay, we need to have, a brochure that explains what this program is and what we do. So we went and, 20 year olds, absolutely zero budget. We were like asking for a grant for like maybe, $50 or whatever, and drawing this thing by ourselves. And I'm thinking back, we didn't have Canva, we didn't even have computers, for crying out loud. So anyway, went to the printer, printed this thing, and sent it to all the big law firms everywhere. And I feel like then we had big celebration, all kinds of things that alumni groups do. But I think that's the first, concrete thing that I feel I really had leadership, exercise my leadership. And it's a very fond memory for me.
Man, I was in college right when email became a thing, but it
Hmm.
was black screen, green font, and I remember not being able to figure it out. Like, we'd go to the computer lab, and I, like,
Yeah.
would spend, like, 20 minutes writing something, and then I couldn't figure out how to hit send,
Yeah.
and then I would call over the, like, lab geek to be like, and he would bring this, like, binder of
Oh my God.
information, and he'd flip through it and try to help me figure out what went wrong, and I thought, "This is never gonna take off."
Oh
If it's
well.
this hard. And that's
Yeah.
I'm gonna date myself. That was 1992 that I
Hmm.
was just maybe 93 that I was just starting to get my hands a little bit into that. So I can't even imagine trying to organize, right, before
Yeah.
having access to things like,
Oh yeah.
my father once told me the best invention ever was the fax machine because
Hmm.
he used to have to overnight FedEx information, like drafts of, designs
Hmm.
of programs,
Hmm.
like, I guess, he was working on things that had, like, architect things,
Right.
and to
Right.
be able to just write a
Yeah.
little note and fax it back and forth. Yeah, so
Yeah.
imagine
Great.
everyone, take a moment back in the
Yeah.
time machine to, like, organize a new organization in that time frame.
Yeah.
So, I'm like, "We
Mailing,
survived."
sticking stamps, licking
I
envelopes,
know my kids will
folding the
never know the
brochure.
pleasure of
Yeah.
stuffing envelopes and
That
looking
special
stamps.
taste.
So, I wanna wind the clock even a little bit further back, dare we do.
Oh my God.
What were you like on the playground in grade school? Like,
Oh my
were you outgoing back then, or were you reserved? Did teachers see potential in you? Did you run for office? Were you active in any after school activities and clubs? Like, what kinda kid were you?
Yeah.
And where did you
No,
grow up?
yeah, I grew up in Paris, and I no, I was pretty introverted, and actually I was bullied pretty badly in school. Yep, yeah. So talk about leadership. There were some older kids who were leading this group of the older girls, and it was a girls' school, and some of us were, the slaves. So we had to do these exercises in the schoolyard, and we were supposed to do their bidding and all of this. Yeah, it was pretty bad. They would take us to the bathroom and, slap our bums when we were not doing what they wanted. So yeah, that was not good.
A hard way
But
to grow up, yeah.
yeah, yeah. But we got over that. Actually, my mom found a really great solution. She invited them all over for tea. What do you know, right?
What,
Yeah,
that worked?
it worked. Yeah.
She
I was
invited
like,
them over for
I know.
tea, and
It
did
was
she yell at
dec
them? Did she
no, no, no,
sternly?
it was decades later that I realized the absolute genius of
Yeah.
it. I didn't realize at the time. I was like, "What? You're doing what?" She had them all for tea, over for tea, and we just had this really nice little afternoon. Of course, it was really awkward for me, but never any bullying happened again. I know,
Wow.
right?
I'm gonna tuck that one away in my
I
parenting
know,
cap
right?
just in case. I'll have to start having tea so I can have them over for tea, but
Right.
that's amazing. That's a rough place to live from. Did junior high and high school get better? Did, like,
Like 6th grade and all this was a little rough because then I went to a mixed school, both
mm,
genders. So then the boys were like sort of, I guess I was attracting bullies for a few years.
mm,
That went away, that stopped, but I was, yeah. So yeah, and then later on, I guess I don't know what you would call it, but like 8th grade, 8th, ninth grade, things
mhm.
got better. And, Yeah, and then I started having activities. In fact, when I started doing tap dancing, I didn't know we were going to get into all this, but when I used to do tap dancing, we'd start organizing shows, and then I would start doing, fundraising, inviting parents to it, and I started to kind of come into my own, from and being
That's a
on stage
really
was fun.
different way of showing up compared to,
Yeah,
like, hiding because, if people are bullying you, you're gonna make yourself
yeah,
small. But
yeah,
if you're starting to create shows and fundraising, inviting parents, like,
yeah,
you're showing up in a bit you're more visible. What was that
yeah,
like to
yeah.
start being more visible?
Yeah, I started to, come into my own. Again, my mom had a huge role because she was always really encouraging me and telling me what she saw for me in the future. And I really
Mm,
believed it, I believed her. And so it gave me strength and confidence. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to kind of discover all these new ways of showing up and all these shows. And then I went to college and organized a show with some tap dancing. I'm saved by the fact that there were no, videos back then or anything, so there's no embarrassing moments.
yeah, yeah. So 12, 13, 14 years old, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up? Was there, like, a career path laid out in front of you?
Um, when I was very little, I wanted to be a surgeon,
Mm,
interestingly. And then I realized that blood kind of made me queasy, so I was going, I guess that's not going to work.
not
But
good.
I used to always, I was fascinated with little notebooks, and I would recreate. It's probably cliche, but I would teach my dolls, and I would do the exercises in their notebooks, and then I would take a red pen and then I would correct it and tell them how, they were doing badly and all this. And so I think the whole thing about teach and my mom was a teacher, so there was that too. I think the whole teaching thing, I didn't see it as a profession, even though my mom was one. I didn't see it as a profession for me, but that is a theme that continued throughout my life. Like everywhere I went, I was always organizing ways for people to learn better. So when I
Mhm.
started at Pfizer, for example, I was in the finance department, and all of us were just thrown in. And there was a new batch of 4 or 5 of us every year in the finance department, and we were all thrown in like, "Oh, okay, you got to learn, like sink or swim." And I was like, "There's got to be a better way." So I got the other people of my year together, and we thought, okay, what are the things that you struggled with, right? And we wrote it all down, and then we created this manual that all the new people could come and learn and just be more efficient. Like, why didn't that exist already before
Yeah,
us?
why it's the
Yeah,
onboarding document. Alright, you
right.
jumped ahead now to Pfizer, and I wanna know how you ended up working in a brand name like that. When you went off to college, I'm assuming you
Hmm.
went to university, what
Hmm.
what was the, goal when you were attending? What was the degree you're aiming for? Where do you think it was taking you?
Yeah. Okay, this is going to be it's a very meandering path, so I hope you're ready for it. So, when I was in my teens, I really was fascinated by all these courtroom dramas, and I decided I wanted to be a lawyer.
Mhm,
So, I studied law in London and in Paris, this English and French law degree I mentioned, and so I wanted to be a lawyer, and I was a lawyer for a few years, and then I thought, it's a little bit too sidelines, like talk about leadership. I decided when I was a lawyer up there, we were on the fifth floor, and everybody was like, "Oh, she's going to the fifth floor, top floor of the building." Um, and I was like, "No, that's not the way to help the clients, right? I got to go and meet them in their office." But we normally this was the Ivy Tower, right? The legal department. You don't go down to the masses. This is also France. We're talking about very socially layered, right? And I started going down to the departments and getting to know the different, the marketing and finance, all those people to help them with their legal problems. So we doubled or tripled the volume of work we had in the legal department, which was a good thing because we were doing prevention as opposed to fixing. But my boss didn't see it that way. So he put an end to all of that. So anyway, I got annoyed with that and frustrated, and I said, no, I want to be in the heart of business. So I'm going to do an MBA. That's how I landed in this country. I was in France before. So came here and I thought I would have 2 years. I was doing my MBA. I thought I had 2 years to decide what I was going to do with my life. Little did I know, week two, you got to do your resume and start applying for internships. So I was like, okay, I guess I don't have a lot of time to decide. And I decided I wanted to be in finance. Feels like such a weird decision looking back now, but at the time there was a logic to it. So I thought that was the skill that was missing the most from my um, toolkit, I guess. So anyway, so I applied and I got an internship with Sharing Plow at the time. Again, dating myself, doesn't exist anymore, really. Um, I guess it's part of Merck now. Anyhow, and I loved the pharmaceutical industry. I really thought, this is something I want to be a part of. So, long story short, I, interviewed, applied, and then landed at Pfizer at the end of the MBA.
Wow. And were you happy with that new role that you had sort of carved out for yourself?
So I was happy for about 3 months, and then I got frustrated. I got frustrated with all the illogical things that were being done, and I'm going to go publicly on record here saying some of the things that yeah was a bit shady, or at least it wasn't legally shady, but by my ethical standards, it was just not. So I thought, and I was again more, finance was still again not in the heart of things. The decisions, right? We're still advisors. So I said, no, I want to be in marketing. So it took me, 3 years, but I finally I got into marketing. Had to take some lateral moves.
Yeah. It sounds
Yeah.
like you have like incredible amounts of education and degrees, but you were
Mm,
having a hard time finding a match for the
yeah.
passion you have on how you wanna
Mm,
show up in the world and the
exactly.
way you can offer value and have a huge impact. Like, there's a lot of
Absolutely.
skill, but if the skill doesn't that the
Yeah.
passion, that's could lead to burnout. Even though it's a skill people need,
Absolutely.
it's just not the skill you wanna be known for.
Yeah, that's very good analysis. And I wish I'd had some entrepreneur role models around me because I would have jumped over to entrepreneurship much sooner because obviously this was the thing that was matched for me. But it took another, 15 years before I did that.
And what did lead to that? I
So,
mean, it sounds like you got into marketing, you
mhm,
worked in that field for a
yeah,
while, that's ended up being a
mhm,
place you were happy.
yeah,
But, it is a big leap to go
mhm,
from a paycheck with the
yeah,
relative security or at least what we think of as the security of the paycheck,
yeah,
and a steady job. So, did you start meeting people who were in the entrepreneurial world? Like, how'd you build up that knowledge base that was even a
yeah.
possibility?
No, it was totally by default
Mhm.
because uh, I'm now very grateful, but I was laid off.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I left Pfizer, did other things. It's too long to explain, but I ended up at Bayer. And then it was 2009, you remember, like 08, 09, plus there were other factors with the product I was working on that was dropped. Anywho, yeah, I was laid off, which of course at that point was a huge hit to my identity because being in these big Fortune 50 companies and having this role was, really who I was. So it took a while, but finally I realized, later that that was actually a huge blessing because I was finally out. And the entrepreneurship thing was complete accident. I was doing a lot of networking. I know we're going to talk about networking because it's a big topic that we both love. So I was doing a lot of networking to find a job or to find, whatever was going to be next for me. And I met this gentleman, and long story short, he tells me about a client of his who wants something just done, and he was totally not interested in it. And I thought it was fascinating. So I said, "Hey, I'll take it and I'll do it." And created a proposal, whatever, and then the client didn't take it on, but I was so in love with it, he and I got together and we started a business out of it.
That's amazing. So even when that first foray into entrepreneurship didn't work as planned,
Hmm.
it still led to a positive outcome.
Yes, yes, because I saw the potential for this idea, and again, it was this drive. Like I found this niche in the market, this gap in the market. And I said, no, we have to fill it. It was just this
What was it that you were
urge.
initially selling?
It was helping companies to do business globally. There's a lot of misconceptions about how to, expand your business outside your borders. It's a very complicated thing to do. And there's just a huge gap of knowledge. And so I wanted to fill that.
You are
Yeah.
uniquely situated to talk about that.
Well, that's what I thought, legal, finance, marketing, French,
Yeah.
American.
Yeah. You bring a lot to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in some ways, everything you did that didn't really land you where you wanted to be
Mm,
built up all this strength within you, all
mhm.
these skill sets, your
Yeah.
toolbox is overflowing with tools. Then you
Mhm.
were like, "Why do I even need this tool anymore?" And then suddenly there's an opportunity and you're like,
Yeah.
"Oh." Yeah, so,
Mhm.
and you were in business with someone else, so some of the early parts of having to start a business, you had someone else with experience to guide you, it sounds like.
Yes. 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 A gentleman who was much more seasoned, obviously, than I was. No, not seasoned at all as an entrepreneur,
Oh,
but he had already had, a couple of businesses and sold them successfully. So we partnered, and it was a lot of fun. We created this huge network of um, specialists to have a big sort of faculty, we called it, of people around the world that could help with all the different topics and in different countries. And we built all of that through LinkedIn. And that's one of the things that, I had started using LinkedIn when I was in my corporate role. And then when we decided to do this company, it was like, okay, how are we going to do this? And gradually, by connecting people who connected us to others, we built this huge faculty of 150 people around the world
wow, that's
to help
impressive.
us. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, one, I wanted to say that LinkedIn back then doesn't even look like what we do today with LinkedIn.
Hmm.
So the way you're using it back then sounds more like what people can do today, but back
Hmm.
then it was I'm gonna call it static. It was very static, like, it
Yeah,
was very, like, upload your resume or your CV,
yeah.
and that was sort of it, and, like, people weren't really actively,
Mm.
in my circles, using it for anything until maybe they were
Mhm.
desperate. Maybe when they were desperate, they would then suddenly mass email, message
Yeah,
everybody that they could find, like, "Help me
right.
out."
Mm.
Like, "Who are you?" So that's one thing I just wanna note. It's very interesting that
Mhm.
you thought to use it that way. The second,
Mhm.
I'm curious how long you had that business together. Like, how long did that run?
So that business, so I started it in 2012 and I pivoted in 2021. So
Oh,
9 years.
long time.
Yes. It was very, very, very difficult. It was a huge, I mean, looking back, it's like completely crazy to start from like having zero experience doing this very complicated global business
Yeah.
with partners and, B2B. But so, yeah, it was very difficult. And I went about it, really, really backwards way because here I was thinking I was a marketing expert because I had done marketing at Pfizer. So, hey, who's to teach me marketing? But I actually had zero understanding of what marketing is, the daily, like as an entrepreneur, it's a completely different discipline. So, I didn't do market research. I did all the things wrong. I spent 2 years creating the program. I had it's funny now, I had detailed curriculum for, a whole program, weeks and weeks of program, but, no client, no knowledge of what people wanted. Yeah. It's embarrassing now to talk about it, but yeah, I did it
We
that way.
all go through that. It's
Yeah.
expert syndrome.
Mhm.
We are so
Yeah.
clearly able to see the problem.
Yeah.
We can't believe that others can't. We think people just need a solution. Like, that's
Yeah.
the thing that's missing.
Yeah.
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 I mean, I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I put it out into the world and, that was my marketing, which was not marketing and would forget about sales. So when I first encountered Danny Iny in 2018, um, I went, for the ACES program and all this. And he asked me, so what do people say when you make the offer? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what are you saying? I wasn't selling. I wasn't selling. I was just like, here's my thing, you know?
Mhm.
So anyway, long story short, it didn't really work out as it worked. I mean, we had clients, but it didn't take off the way that I really had
Yeah.
envisioned at all. And I got so burned, so burned, so burned out. I was
Yeah.
working 15 hours a day with zero results, you know?
I was wondering what brought you to Danny Any, because that's how you and
Mhm.
I met was through,
Yeah.
Mirac's ACES program, and we actually met in person, not knowing that this would be a relationship we'd have this
Yeah.
long,
Yeah.
in
True.
December of 2019,
Yep.
which was one of my last in-person escapades before the pandemic, and it was a bit of
Yes.
an escapade because it was in Montreal, so I had to
Yes.
travel,
Yeah.
we were there
December.
for several days. So,
Mhm.
um first, how did you come across Danny Any? And it sounds like you knew you had something missing in your business model at that point. And like, what were you seeking, and how did you sort of connect
Yeah.
in that world?
I think I was just so burnt out. I was really depressed at that point, and I was just looking for something else to do that would help me to find myself and bring me something positive, something that I could sink my teeth into, that was smaller, easier, that I could do and prove to myself that I was capable of doing. And so I thought, oh, an online course. I was, searching stuff on Facebook, and this thing came up, and I was like, oh, an online course. I could do that. That's easy. And so I took the course lab thingy, and then you know how it is, like with the funnel, gradually went to the lift in San Diego. I don't know if you were there. And
Mm.
then
Big conference though, right? It's like a big experience
right. Yes.
with a sales pitch at the end to
Yeah.
encourage you to sign up for this
Yeah.
year-long mastermind.
Yeah. And it was actually a really big revelation moment, because, and I remember I was, you know, in tears several times during that conference, because it was the first time I was in a room with entrepreneurs. I mean, the only entrepreneur I knew was my partner. And I was very, very lonely during those 8 years. I was with him, but we were coming from a different place, and all of a sudden I'm sitting here with all these people, and they had the same problems, and they're lonely, and it's things are working, not working, like it was such a life-changing experience. I had never had community before, and all of a sudden I had this community around me. So I wanted to be part of it. And took a while before I could, muster up the funds, but I signed up, and tried, and I had almost given up on the business, but I said, I'll if I can't do it with the ACES program, then it's just not it can't be done. Right? So I'll give it my all for another year, and and then we'll see. And then the pandemic hit, and it was like the nail in the coffin. It
Yeah.
was just, yeah.
So there's a
Yeah.
couple things I want to kind of pull from that, and I think the biggest one is just that revelation that there's a community out there. I
Mm,
had a similar
huge.
experience. I went to a conference last week for the National
Yeah.
LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and while I, have community of entrepreneurs around me in lots of ways,
Mhm.
and I have gone for 20 years. I went to an LGBT conference that I think the last time I went was in 2018. I went from like
Mhm.
95 to 2018, 20 times.
Mhm.
So, that was an LGBT advocacy organization conference.
Mhm.
But to meet people who identified like I did, who were also in the same kind of business I was in, who had the same
Mm.
struggles and successes, it was a feeling of coming home, like a really specific,
Wow.
wow, like that's a unique like
Yeah.
confluence of, identity and values and
Yeah.
experience. And I could see how, like, for someone who never had any of that and you're feeling particularly lonely, that
Mm.
was very robust.
Yeah.
Then that's the attraction into being part of something like Miracy. By the way, I interviewed Danny for this show, and I will put a link
Mhm.
to the interview in the show notes. It was very interesting how he came to be who
Mhm.
he is and how
Yeah.
much he's had an impact on the rest of us.
Yeah.
Now the pandemic obviously shook up this
Mm.
international business. You had some new skills. You went on to work for Miracy for a bit, right? You were doing some.
Yeah, I actually learned because I had never had a sales call in my life
Mhm.
before. As I discovered, that was the biggest skill I was missing probably, and so I took some sales training inside of ACES, and lo and behold, I was good at it, as it turns out. So Danny was like, "Wow, that's quite the transformation," and so they
Mhm.
actually hired me to do sales of the ACES program. So I did that for about a year, not, part-time while I was
Yeah, but it's
doing
a great way, I
it.
mean, to sort of build that skill. I ended up working for them. I didn't know a
Yeah.
ton about Mirasee or the ACES
Mhm,
program, and I have to give a shout out to Dory Clark, for suggesting this role for me. It was a
mhm.
part-time coach role, and, I got to start there in 2019, and
Yeah.
I stuck with it, through 2020 until my business really took off and I needed to step back,
Mhm. I
at the end of the
remember.
year.
Yeah.
But it was a great opportunity for me to learn from people while doing, and I think that's kinda what
Yes.
you got the experience too,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
learning and then getting a chance to try it out yourself. So
Yeah.
your business model today, I mean, I didn't know anything. I mean, first of all, I had no idea you worked in finance, that you had a law degree. I didn't know that, you worked at Pfizer and all this stuff. Like, there's a lot that I'm just learning about you.
Mhm.
But I also really know you as like the person I think of as one of my go-to LinkedIn experts. And I think you and I really started to connect a little bit in 2020, but about 2022, I guess, I started
Mhm.
the Content and Connection Club,
Mhm.
which is a $25 a month, come every Friday. We
Yeah.
hang out, have a mastermind, we have an online,
Mhm.
community, and we have access to all kinds of content I've created.
Mhm.
And half that money goes to charity, which I'm really proud of.
Yes.
And you were like, "Oh yeah, right. I should, I haven't really been going to his free things. Let me rejoin." And
Mhm.
that's where you and I really connected, and you've been regular ever since. And I've
Mhm.
seen your business really booming around how you define the work you do. So just give us a
Mhm.
little snapshot. I said in your intro, LinkedIn has led to a lot of opportunities for you. When
Mhm.
did you realize that that was a skill that you could sell? Like, I think, like for me, networking was something I was good at, but it took me a while to figure out how to package it to help
Yeah.
other people. Like, when did you have the aha? Wait, people need help with LinkedIn and I can help them?
Yeah. That was a direct, gift from the pandemic, because March 2020, we all know I had actually a tour of conferences organized for Europe that in March 2020. Yeah, I was going to tour 4 or 5 countries and give, talks and now sell after at the end of it because I had done that in the past and it had worked great, but I hadn't followed up and I hadn't sold. So I was going to do that. And with the help of Mercy and now my selling skills, I was going to sell. So that didn't pan out. So I turned it into webinars, but it was nobody would. Yeah. So anyway, so we're all a bit at a standstill in March 2020, and I was hearing a lot of my colleague, my fellow entrepreneurs panic about their business development. They couldn't go to networking events, they couldn't go to conferences. Their ways of finding clients were drying up, and I was totally not seeing that because yeah. So I was like, but there's LinkedIn. Like, so what's the problem? And they're like, what do you mean LinkedIn? What? So I said, well, let's get on a call. I'll show you a few things. And they're like, oh, you can do that. Oh, you can do that. Oh, I didn't. And I was as flabbergasted as they were. And so I did in the course of a year, I probably did 50, 60, something like that, free coaching calls. And my friends were telling me, well, you're really good at this. You should, package it. You could sell it. And I was like, but it's a hobby. That's the typical thing, right? With entrepreneurs. But finally I said, yeah, let me try. So I just took a one sheet. And it's funny because it was at the end of the ACES program. And I took everything that I had learned and just now focused it all on this one endeavor. And pew, it took off, right away. Like I put an offer on one page. I sent an email to people, all the things that we had learned, right? Um, and somebody said, yes, I'm in. And another person said, yes, I'm in. And I was like, oh, I got a program. Oh, I got a business.
It's amazing. I mean, just to say something from what you said earlier about having a business and now having this new one, I always say to people, a business is when someone's willing to pay you. A successful business is when you can anticipate the next person wanting to pay you.
Mhm. That's
So,
true.
it feels like in this case, those 50, 60 calls were all research calls, even though you were
Yeah,
helping, where you're giving
yeah.
away free advice, but you were also learning like what the problems
Mhm.
were, the language they were using, and
Yeah.
you maybe weren't doing it in the let me track every minute of this, but you were applying
Mhm.
these skills.
Yeah.
And then you were able to take a step back and be like, oh, I know a lot about what they need, and I can write this one, page
Mhm.
sign up
Yep.
document in their language, like what's their pain
Exactly.
points and all that, the
Mhm.
things that maybe were elusive to you before.
Yep.
And now it was about creating a program based on all that input where
Yep.
earlier in your earlier business, you developed something for 2 years without any
The other
input.
way. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
and when I work with coaching clients one-on-one, a lot of times, like, the work of having those, I don't know, somewhere around 25 or more calls, depending on, like, their level of,
Mhm.
sort of familiarity with clients,
Mhm.
is it's a slog. It's not
Mhm.
it takes time, and I'm like, "It's gonna save you so
Oh,
much
yeah.
time."
Plus it's fun. I think a lot of people who when they once they really, 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 really don't wanna do it, but then once they start, most people I find, I don't know about what you think, most people end up having fun with it
Yeah.
because yeah, they're fun calls, but yeah, sometimes people don't wanna do it.
Yeah, well, they kinda can't see, they're like, "No, no, I wanna rush ahead and just make this program. I wanna rush ahead
Mm,
and make this course." Like, I know exactly what
mm,
my people need. I'm like,
yes.
or you could, vet that idea a little bit more
Yeah,
and get a
yeah,
affirmation. And sometimes you do know what they need, but they don't know what they need. So you
exactly.
have to find the marketing language to track them in and figure out like what is, in my
Mhm.
words, small p problem
Yeah,
that they
exactly.
have. And so yeah,
Mhm.
I think everything that Miracy was teaching you ended up being very applicable to this new role. And then you just iterated again. You have now the magnet
Mhm.
model.
Mhm.
What is the magnet method about?
Yeah, so when I first started, I was really focused on, okay, let me show you how to use LinkedIn, right? So all the technical things, where to click and all of that. And as I through the all the coaching I had done before and when I started having clients, I really noticed that I was attracting and there were a lot of people who entrepreneurs who have a problem with visibility really. So it's beyond whether you're on Facebook or LinkedIn or anywhere else. It's how to be visible in the world, what to say to not sound like you're bragging and you're one of those bro marketers, right? Like, oh, and look at me with my Ferrari, like the cliche, right? But how do you talk about what you do in a way that's not braggy? Um, so people are having really difficulty with that. And the other thing that I noticed is that a lot of the people that I ended up working with and the ones who I enjoyed working with the most were those who were really passionate about what they do. And they have this solution that can help individual people, and so they want to sell their program to individual people, but they also have a bigger message that is important for more people to hear, whether it's so they become aware of their problem and become clients, or just important to know about, to know more about. And so the match between this set of people and their problems and what LinkedIn offers is so made in heaven because LinkedIn is just perfect for sharing on a daily basis how you help people and opening up bigger conversations. So it's the ideal place. And I really wanted to make that clear. And it took me, a good 2 years to finally put words into all this and a graphic. Thanks to Simon Bowen. I think we should put that in the show notes as well because Simon Bowen played a huge part for me to be able to really extract the gold of what it is that I do with clients, beyond just what you could, I guess, learn through YouTube videos, like where to click and what to do. I don't know if you could actually, but you know what I'm saying. It's a lot more than just how to use LinkedIn. So that's
Yeah.
what the magnet model is.
That's awesome. And it sounds like your ideal clients are entrepreneurs. Is there a gender role in that, or is it like age, or is it a type of business? Like, how do you further define
Yeah.
that?
So I say mission-driven entrepreneurs. Um, Gender, I think I attract about, like, my clients are about two-thirds women, but,
Mhm.
you know, third men, or sometimes half, it depends on the events. Usually older, because it's people who've just gathered enough experience over the years and have gone through all the stages of life that lead them to a place where they have found what they're really passionate about. I find a lot of younger people just don't, I mean, I shouldn't generalize. There's plenty of young people who have passion, but a lot of times they went through a life like mine and yours and whoever else, right? Is, yeah, we do this and that, and gradually kind of narrow into this one thing. So that's usually who they are.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
appreciate that. For my coaching, I say I tend to work with entrepreneurial women in their 50s and beyond,
Hmm.
and a few good men
Yeah, I
who
love
are
that.
looking to grow their impact and income through a new revenue stream.
Mhm,
Yeah, but there's a way in which these folks, like you said, they have a body of knowledge. They've got,
mhm,
20, 30 plus years of experience,
mm,
and they have passion, and they're just a little, like, there's a lot of stuff that you're talking about that are a little new to them,
mhm.
and you can guide them forward on how
Yeah,
to take their gift into the world in a way that's
mm,
more visible, attracts the right people. I love this.
yeah,
And, we were just talking about networking. So I want to just specifically say, like, you have your inner circle of people, but then you
mhm,
have, and you'll stay in touch with those folks, but you have your second and third sort of layers or
mhm,
tiers out, that people you might see once a year at a conference.
mm.
You maybe work with them 5 years ago. Oh, you enjoy each other's company. That's like part of this, right? It's a
Yeah,
given. How do
yeah,
you think about nurturing and sustaining those kinds of, weaker connections? Any habits,
mm.
philosophies, practices?
Yeah, I don't have good habits around that, and I do have on my, short-term goals to make this a little more systematic, because the network is growing and I can't hold it all in my head. Um, but what I do is connect people. I connect people all the time. 4 or 5 times a day, I'm connecting people. Sometimes it's a very clear thing. You're both working on this, or this that you don't know that, and we it makes sense to connect them. And sometimes it's just more of a gut feel, like, you two will get along great, right? So let
Mhm,
me introduce you and just trust me on this. um, and I also, because I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, I come across a lot of interesting information. And so I love this whole connecting the dots activity. And so I see something that I think could be relevant to someone and I send it to them. So in a way, that's my way of staying in touch with people. But again, it's not systematic. If nothing shows up, that could interest this particular person who's in my network who I haven't talked to in 3 years, if nothing just triggers that thought, then it doesn't happen. And that's what I want to fix.
mhm. But
Yeah.
does sound like you're really good at the matchmaking and connecting of
Mm.
people, and knowing, like, what would be of greatest interest to both parties.
Yeah.
And I know you just forwarded another, opportunity to me, just yesterday. Like,
Hmm.
you see something, I think that one of the things that probably helps you is when the people in your network have a very specific and clear, message about what they do and who they're trying to work with.
Mm.
So the clearer someone is, the easier it is for you to, like, make
Yes.
those matches. So for
Hmm.
anyone who's in Sophie's network, like, make sure to, like, reach out and let her know what it is you're up to these
Hmm.
days, so that she can keep an eye out. As we wrap up and head into our final question, we're going to
Hmm.
pause for a moment for a word from our sponsor. All right, favorite wrap up question. I know for 100% sure that you and I are going to not spend a year not talking, because
Hmm.
you're part of the Content and Connection Club, which, by the way,
Hmm.
folks,
Yes.
contentandconnectionclub.com is where you can
Hmm.
go. And it's a great space for entrepreneurs. We can talk more about that later if you'd like. But,
I share that link with people a
oh,
couple
you
times a week. Yes, I do.
yay. I love it. It's just been really life giving
Yeah,
to me to
it's
have that
exactly.
space.
Hmm.
So a year from now, though, I remember, hey, we had this interview last year. I'm going to want you to reflect on your successes in that year. I want to know what am I going to be celebrating for you a year from now? What are you most looking forward to in the year ahead?
Mm. So, in a year from now, I would hope that my book is finally written. Now that I've finally revealed the magnet model, I can fill in the blanks and write this book. So the book is out, is being read by as many entrepreneurs as possible, so they can get out of their own way and focus on their mission and get out there. Um, I am launching a new group coaching program as a pilot. It's everything that I've done with my one-on-one clients in a group format. So I'm piloting that next month in a few weeks. So hopefully that has gone well and I'm able to have a bigger scale impact, right? So have more entrepreneurs go through my program. Um, and yeah, just more people to help and more fun to be had.
Those are some big projects right there. I don't know, you need a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm excited to support you and celebrate you in doing that, and
Thanks.
book launches are kind of my thing, so
Oh,
I'll
yes.
be here to help
Yes.
you with that. I'm so
Yes.
excited for you and for all the people who will then have access to your knowledge. How can people find you and follow your work?
Yes, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Sophie Lechner. You have the spelling in the show notes, Lechner. I'm fine, easy to find on LinkedIn. My um, new website now is themagnetmodel.com. So it's now easy to remember.
Fantastic. We'll put all
Yeah.
those links in the show notes at ontheschmooze.com. Sophie, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you for having me. I've had a blast. Thank you.